Welcome to this December 8th. Feels like the holiday season's coming in, huh, Alex?
We are here. It's here. It is the end of a very, very long year.
You might want to share everybody your experience. And so Alex and I both live in Northern California, and one of the yearly holiday traditions is that you go to Union Square in San Francisco and you do some shopping for your family. And Alex, maybe share your experience the other day.
Well, it's normally very festive. There's a big tree in Union Square. They usually have the Salvation Army ringing bells and bustling people and shoppers, and it's a hand-to-hand combat to get parking. And I went down there 2 days ago. Silence. Street parking available. No shoppers. No Salvation Army. Absolute eerie silence. No construction sounds. It couldn't possibly be more abandoned. Very, very different. First time ever I've seen it like that.
Yeah, we both have lived here for a while. Myself, it's been about 24 years, but the everything you just described, the hustle and bustle, the fact that you could get street parking, you can't even get that in San Francisco, let alone during the holiday season. So, yeah, that must have been an eerie feeling. There's all kinds of TV shows that probably could have been created during your time there. As you start to walk around, there's nobody around. Well, welcome.
Lesson. You get so irritated when you can't make your way through the crowd, and then I miss the crowd.
Now you miss the crowd.
Reminder that we like and enjoy it as much as we complain.
Well, I think would be interesting for everybody from our customers today and people that have joined us this morning is to talk a little bit about your background. Even though you're the Chief Marketing Officer of Banner Health, one of the largest health systems in the world, you have a lot of history with not only healthcare systems, but financial systems in Charles Schwab, as well as some other American Express, I believe, right? So maybe you could just give us a little bit of quick background. It's interesting because you've been doing the whole concept of digital performance all the way back in your career.
Yeah. So thank you, Joe. So I'm basically a plumber by training. I spent the first half of my career at American Express. I spent most of my career in financial services. Wow. But American Express got so good at collecting customer data across call, click, or visit that they spun off a subsidiary that did that for other companies. And that's what brought me to the West Coast. So I went out to San Francisco, or came out to San Francisco and opened the office. And we did those customer platforms. We created digital platforms for Wells and B of A and Nordstrom's and Apple. So we got really good at the plumbing part, and we used all of that data that we collect to do really highly personalized marketing. And then when financial services melted down, I moved over into healthcare just as the Affordable Care Act was coming online. And the healthcare systems, which were pretty much 25 years behind financial services, needed to start putting those digital platforms into place. And I went to Kaiser to open up the exchanges so that people could buy their policies online. Yeah,
that's great. So you have multiple industry background. And one of my favorite stories, if you don't mind sharing, is I remember when you first were at Kaiser and you were thinking about implementing the whole concept of tracking reviews for doctors. And if you think about the concept back then when you were doing that, I always think of healthcare being behind financial services as well as behind other technology waves. And especially when you think about medical care wanting reviews about themselves. And if you think back when you first did this at Kaiser, it'd be interesting for you to share that story, because I think it's funny how the mindset of healthcare has really shifted in the last 10 years.
It has. So when I started, so this would have been 2009, which was not that long ago, but at that point, about 20,000 doctors. And I thought it was a great idea. So ratings and reviews were happening all over the place, and we really needed to know what those looked like. We had particular facilities and particular physicians that were really getting slammed, and we wanted to do something about it. So I brought what I thought was a bright idea to the physicians, and I was basically run out on a rail. I just had never anticipated such a vocal and such a negative reaction. And they truly felt, and I think I understand, that they were educated, experienced clinicians, and they didn't want the great unwashed, meaning the public, passing judgment on their clinical, their clinical quality when they had no idea what they were doing in their minds. And
Right.
so they deeply believed that if they ignored it, it would just go away. And we know with hindsight that it didn't go away, and it never goes away. So what I had to do was get one brave cardiologist in LA to actually say that his practice would participate. And we just did a 6-week pilot. And lo and behold, we were able to double traffic for that practice in those 6 weeks. We doubled traffic, we doubled appointments, we doubled volume. And physicians really only listen to other physicians, but all the other doctors were pretty much blown away. But it took one brave pioneer like that to get it going, because it was complete organ rejection. No, we want nothing to do with this. They're going to say bad things, and we're nothing doing.
I love all your terms. Organ rejection.
It was. Yep, we did a transplant and the organ was rejected. No, we're not taking this.
We're like, there's no way we're letting people make comments about our healthcare performance.
No, they're not qualified, and they say bad things. And what if crazy people say things? And yes, the world is full of crazy people, but they say things too. And if you ignore them, the not crazy people are going to read those comments.
But if you think about the world we're in today, I call it the feedback economy. Really, healthcare is no different than anything else, right? Like, you have to be reputable, and you have to have some kind of positive experience with communicating with either your patients or your customers. How can it be any different than the normal consumer world, right? So maybe talk a little bit about being accountable. And if you think about what's happened since you did that in 11 years ago, I mean, it has completely shifted now, where you see not only people tracking reviews and ratings, but they're actually interacting with their customers now. And I think that's we call it engagement. But I've seen a lot of improvement over the years since you started that.
Yes, it is. It has changed dramatically. And I think what has triggered the change is that over 50% of the population now does not have a primary care physician. So it used to be that it was just this inviolate relationship between you and your physician, your family physician, your primary care, and you chose your insurance during open enrollment, or everything was driven by that relationship with a physician. And you already had an established relationship, so you didn't have to go out and shop. Well, what's happened, especially with high deductibles and with insurance plans that have changed a lot, is that most people now, 53%, so the majority of the public doesn't have a primary care physician. So they are shopping, and they are actively looking for transactional-based healthcare. So many of them aren't looking for a relationship. Depending on your age group, you might not want a relationship. You want somebody for your broken ankle or hives or whatever it is. So You're actively shopping, and the first thing you look at is ratings and reviews, because it's just like Amazon or Nordstrom's or any of those places where you say, does somebody else like those shoes? Did somebody else like that shirt? And so you're trying to you're out there shopping. Most of the healthcare public is out there shopping. And if you don't have ratings and reviews to anchor you, first of all, Google doesn't rank you in Google My Business. And second of all, you don't get choices. And when we show physician listings without ratings and reviews versus with rating reviews, physicians that have ratings and reviews are 6 times more likely to get the appointment than those who don't. So if you want a 600% advantage, you better make sure that you're paying attention to those ratings and reviews.
Well, and if you think about it, we all use this fancy term, the digital front door. You basically just described it, because if I can't find you as a doctor, that's one issue. The second issue, if you don't have a really positive reputation, you won't even get ranked inside of Google. And to be able to find you, as well as be able to have quick diagnostics on whether you could help me or not, is all really inside of that information. And so that's interesting that you just tied it to the actual search side, which is probably the most important thing to getting these appointments. And I think that's what they don't really correlate positive reviews with search. And that's sort of our mission at Reputation. We're like, look, this is really important. You have to actually connect the two, because to have positive reviews is great. You can interact with it, but to have it influence search is really what I think you talk about, and why it's so important.
Yes, that's our number one job. 85% of all healthcare decisions start with an online search. And it's sort of like the sweepstakes language, must be present to win. If you don't rank, you never get chosen. And when we do keyword buys, people are not very discriminating when they are looking for a doctor. It almost always is the near me is what they put in. So pediatrician near me, cardiologist near me. And that's quite general. You need to have your physicians rank, and you need to get first of all, part of the ranking is having the star ratings. And then you need enough information and quality ratings to make sure that you get chosen.
Sure. If you think about it, it's not just for hospitals too. If you think about like senior care facilities now, you talk about important. I mean, when you start thinking about having your loved ones go and being provided in a senior care facility, now you're really talking about like entrusting your loved one with other people doing, actually taking a look at your loved one. And that's a big deal. If you look here at one of these examples, Sava Senior Care, you start looking at the plus 33% increase in review response over the last year, 4 million more listing views since last year. Like, these are big deals when you start thinking about senior care facilities. And you can see there on the right what Alex was talking about, that Google My Business panel, having the positive reviews. That's all really important as you start to think through, putting a loved one in a facility like that. I mean, where would you more importantly want to look at reviews, Alex?
Yes, very, very true. And it is times 10 now because of COVID. For most of the year, visitors haven't been allowed in senior facilities and skilled nursing and hospitals. So it's an act of faith to say, oh, I'm going to be releasing my mom into this facility. And if you don't have those ratings and reviews, it's pretty tough to have people choose you.
Sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about today's current world. A lot of people that logged on this morning want to hear from you on how is COVID-19 impacting the world at Banner? How are you navigating through this pandemic? We're 9 months into this. Maybe you could give us a quick high-level overview of what you're doing as a leader to navigate Banner through this COVID process. It'd be great to hear.
Sure. So I think what we've all seen through both the political cycle that we're going through and through the pandemic is that the issues at hand are less logical and much more emotional. So people voted by emotion, and people make their healthcare choices by emotion. And in a very escalated situation, and everybody's been escalated for 9 months, those emotions change literally from day to day. Sure. So we have had to be on point every single day, actively listening, because I say I don't need to be right in my messaging. I just need to be effective. So I don't care what I think is right or good messaging. I just need to be effective, because literally lives are at stake. If people don't do what we ask them to do, they're going to put their parents' lives in peril. They're going to put themselves in peril. So getting the message out and providing more and more remote options for getting their care. So it's telehealth, it's nurse hotlines, it is symptom checkers that they can use online, but providing more and more of those remote options. And when people are choosing remotely, those ratings and reviews are particularly important because they're already feeling not safe. So providing some element of safety when everything around them, for a lot of Americans, the world just doesn't feel safe now. How do we, for their most important thing, their healthcare for their loved ones, how do we make them feel safe and secure? And so that's mostly what we've been trying to do.
Yeah, and that's been effective. The other thing that you've talked to me about is you've kind of upped your meetings to understand what is the real sentiment from your patients, to more of a weekly process to take a look at what's happening inside of the patient care across the hospitals.
Yes, we actually do 2 all-hands meetings. So we get everybody on a Zoom call twice a week. We do it Monday mornings. We used to do it in the office, the Monday morning stand-up. Yeah. But we bookend our week because so much changes. The most important one is on Friday, because that's when we pull together all the customer sentiment. So we have surveys that we do, and they're mostly around safety. So how safe are you feeling?
Sure.
Then we pull in all the reputation scores. Then we pull in NLP. So we use natural language programming to listen to the comments that we hear in the call center, because we handle about 100,000 calls a week. So what are people saying? How are they rating us? What are we getting in survey data and any syndicated? And then we do, so when everybody is at this Friday meeting, we say, here's what we're hearing. And it's not a little bit different week to week. They zig, they zag, what people are wanting. And right now, for example, is a great case in point, because we went from can't wait for the vaccine, can't wait for the vaccine, hooray, it's almost here, it's almost here. Well, I take delivery of the vaccine in 9 days.
9 days.
And we have gone full turnaround to not me, I won't be your guinea pig, no way in hell. So, we wouldn't know that if we didn't have these weekly meetings. And then we in turn use those meetings to cascade all of our messaging for the subsequent week. And that's where we meet locked and loaded on Monday to say, okay, here's what we're doing with our social messaging. Here's what we're doing with the messaging on the website. Here's what we're blogging. Here's what we're doing with email blasts and here's the scripting that we're putting into the call center. And luckily, because we built this digital platform, we can cascade messages, with a keystroke, but we have to do the listening first and then actively change those messages. And so it's this constant cycle of feedback, change messages, see if we got it right, listen again, change those messages.
Yeah, it's almost like, the old once a month, get everybody together routine ain't working right now, not during a pandemic. No. And so you've actually upped your look, even in the high tech world, Alex, we used to do all hands meetings once a month, and I've do them once a week now, because I want everybody to know that change is coming, and we got to stay with that pattern. And it's not much different than what you're doing in terms of doing it twice a week. You're really staying on top of it, which is obviously really important. Well, I think most of our listeners today want to hear from you, about vaccine distribution. Maybe you could just give everybody a couple of minutes on what you're thinking. How do you prepare for something like that? I mean, you've got, you've already been through the testing logistical nightmare. Now you're going to go through a vaccine logistics. Tell us a little about what you learned through that process that might help you for the vaccine process.
Sure. So the real challenge is doing, whether it was testing, and we did kind of through the School of Hard Knocks learn that way. I mean, early on when we did testing, some people were waiting in their cars for 12 hours. But whether it's testing or vaccines, doing it at scale is really what the challenge is, because the need is so great. And particularly with a vaccine, which has to be kept at 90 degrees below zero, doing it at scale means taking some unusual measures. So what we ended up doing with testing was doing it at the fairgrounds. It's huge. And we could line people up in stations, just like at the Golden Gate Bridge, and have drive-throughs, have people drive up, roll down their window. You have somebody who's gowned and masked with PPE come in and swab your nose. And then, again, we learned the hard way. If people were calling in for their results, and it basically, toppled our call center. So, okay, have automated calls outbound saying, Alex, your COVID test was negative, or Alex, your COVID test was positive. Please come in. Sure. So we are having to do the same thing for the vaccine. So we're going to have a station. We'll be getting 66,000 doses, and then we'll be setting it up at the fairgrounds with multiple lanes. The way the priority goes is, first, it will be anybody who's working on an active COVID ward. Then it will be doctors and nurses who are around COVID patients, but they're not on an active COVID ward. Then It's going to be first responders, so policemen, firemen, EMTs, and the like. Then it will be vulnerable population, so anybody who's older or has health conditions. Sorry, I missed essential workers. So essential workers, and then it'll be the rest of us. So we will start, and you have to get if it's Pfizer, you need to get your jabs 25 days apart. If it's Moderna, they have to be 28 days apart. You cannot mix and match. So the data, we have to collect the data for the state that says Joe got his his stick in the arm on January 1st. And then
Got
we
it.
have to make sure on the 25th you come in for your second stick in the arm. You are not immune until 7 days after the second stick. So we need to keep track of people. And also, so we're messaging two things. Hooray, your vaccine is here. You can relax a little bit, but we need to be able to say, do not relax until you've had both. You cannot mix and match. You cannot have Pfizer first and follow up with Moderna. And it is 7 days. The good news is unlike the flu, a lot of people have crummy reactions from the flu. It is totally different. The flu, you get live vaccine, and sometimes you get you actually get a little case of the flu. This is an RNA, an mRNA injection is totally different. It's very exciting because it can be used in a lot of different ways. So it actually injects a little genetic instruction. And so you've all seen pictures of the coronavirus, that spiky thing. So it will create the genetic instructions, create something with a couple of spikes, not enough to create the virus, but enough for the immune system to say, what's this? I'm going to attack it. And it allows your own immune system to activate. So you don't actually get it.
Well, the way you describe it sounds like people will be a little bit more open-minded once they hear from their other friends who have already had it, that it's not like you said, an ooh feeling like you do when you get a flu vaccine. So that's great. That's good news. We're glad that the process has already kicked into place. Let's change topics to a few things that COVID has probably changed forever. And if you look at a couple of these stats, I'm going to show really quick. Virtual care. Like, we took a look at all the virtual care reviews across all of our hospital systems on the platform. And if you think about virtual care, look at the spike, as you started to come out of the summer and starting to provide for virtual care in facilities, and then started to look at the actual physicians on the right. I mean, we're talking about a massive change in the way you're providing care to your patients. I personally think that this is here to stay, regardless of where we go with post COVID. And I also think the concept of, we also looked at all of the mentions of safety inside of the reviews and all the ratings over the last several months. And take a look at this. I mean, like, if you look at the number of comments around mass, safety, you can see the negative sentiment there in facilities, because everybody's obviously on the heightened. And then on the physician side, a real spike there in the late summer. So I personally think that these two things will continue. I mean, what are some of your thoughts when you start thinking about, virtual care in the future, and then obviously continuing even post-vaccine with safety protocol?
Telehealth and virtual care is a great case study in digital transformation. And all of us, it's certainly, I'll just speak for myself. I tend to, because I've spent most of my career in technology, you tend to think it's the technology. And great, we have the technology to deliver these virtual visits. And isn't that great, particularly in the teeth of a pandemic? But really, transformation, any kind of digital transformation, is a three-legged stool. It's people, process, and technology. So we were sort of catapulted into this virtual care. So 100% of our physicians are enabled. They can, if they so choose, see their patients virtually. What we didn't anticipate was that the people and process part was way more challenging than the technology. And physicians are just like the rest of us. They're all over the spectrum in terms of their acceptance. But I began this conversation, Joe, with, boy, the link between the physician, that primary relationship has been broken.
Right.
They see this as another breakage in the relationship. And we have a lot of resistance from our physicians because they think it's an either or. They think that either somebody's going to be in front of them in their clinic, or they're going to just be a one-off transactional. And they won't build that relationship. And of course, the face-to-face is always the preferable. That is sort of the highest standard of care. But whether it's a pandemic or, quite frankly, Joe, you and I don't have time. If you've got poison oak, I do not want or need to go into the doctor's office. I'd much rather, show a picture of it and say, hey, can you give me some cortisone? No, nobody needs to do that. But I think that technology got there faster than the physician adoption. And it's sort of where we were talking about Kaiser doctors. If you don't get them to understand what the value is, and if you don't get their acceptance, then it's very much harder to keep it going after the pandemic ends. I do think it's here to stay because the demand is so high. And I think the challenge remains, how do we get physicians to understand that this is a supplement to the face-to-face? It's not a substitute.
It's almost like the new normal. And I like the way you described it, because if you think about it, all your follow-up appointments could be done virtually depending on what your issue is. But the follow-up appointments are so convenient. And we've been doing it, my wife and I, with our own home doctor. And it's been, you probably see him 3 times more, which I would imagine from a revenue standpoint is good, because it's more convenient to get on a video call on, follow-up than it is to actually take the time to go into the office. So it's very interesting to see how these trends are occurring, and we're watching it all. One of the things that's been interesting about Banner, and I think you could talk about this for a minute before we end up the day, is that you've got a lot of things going on in terms of looking at sentiment inside of the hospital system, as well as, you start thinking about sentiment in your social feedback, not only the reviews, but also if you think about looking at press. What are they saying in the press? What do they say? I love the fact that you kind of look at everything in its totality. You're not just looking at reviews. You're looking at many things. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
The totality of what it is we look at, or how we use the sentiment?
Both. I think you're one of the few that actually look at a lot of different data, what I'll call listening posts, and then what do you do with it? That'd be great to hear.
Yes. So it's something that is pretty fundamental that we change. So I sit on, as management, I sit on the comp committee of our board of directors. And most people know that the comp committee is a board of directors enforces the strategy that they want their management team to execute against. So they typically give you KPIs, and their job is to butt out, but to hold you accountable for those KPIs. So the sentiment and the social listening cuts in both directions.
Sure.
So 5 years ago, when I arrived at Banner, they said, we really want to be customer centric. So I said, okay, nobody's going to pay attention unless you make it hurt at bonus time. So we put KPIs into place on customer listening and customer sentiment. And it actually was hugely effective, because you get both physicians. Again, if it hits you in the pocketbook, everybody pays attention. I actually had to, and it took me several conversations, just like I had to socialize it with Kaiser doctors. It took me multiple conversations with the Banner board to say, hey, we should really be listening to customer sentiment. So we got them on board, and then we just had our board meeting last week. I had to do a complete about face, because the sentiment now, and particularly the satisfaction scores, if you told me that I can't see my mom when she's in the hospital, it is a dumpster fire. Yeah. So likewise, we don't want to penalize people when the public is highly emotional. Sure. And we had to say, look, we're going to pause it for a year. It's not going to go away. Customer sentiment continues to be important. But all I had to do was show them some of the verbatims, and they're spicy. People are pretty escalated. So we had to say, okay, so it is unfair to hold management responsible for emotional meltdowns that are going to continue to happen until we can, get visitors into facilities again. But equally, we have to make sure that we are keeping ratings and reviews high, because that's how we get people to basically our Find a Doctor tool. Sure. So what I did do was put an incentive. So we have an incentive there for ratings and reviews for Find a Doctor. And to the extent that we continue to have doctors, so people will hate their hospital but love their doctor. So I had to redirect the board score towards the actual physician ratings and reviews. And then with the management team, including with our executive committee, is, to give them reports every week that says, here's what sentiment is saying. Here's what we actually look at all of our media coverage, positive, negative, and neutral, and then all the things I was talking about before, ratings and reviews, natural language programming, all of those. And then here's where we are. And more importantly, here's how we trend week to week. So they see a graph every week that says, oh, how are we doing? And that allows them to make decisions based on that.
That was smart to switch it to physicians, because you can't blame it on them, the whole new rules, and everybody's frustrated with being able to see their loved one.
Right.
Well, listen, I really appreciate you coming on our Fast Break series. Each Fast Break series we examine a couple of different industries, areas where people are obviously not only experiencing the feedback economy, but also putting it into action. And one of the things I always find interesting about you and myself is that we do some pretty peculiar things to do our jobs. And one of them for Alex is she lives in Northern California, but she has quite the interesting commute. So maybe you could comment on that for the group that's with us today.
Oh, yes. Well, Joe, likewise, you got a big part of your reputation team is in Phoenix. And so I was happily commuting. I'd go down on a Monday morning and come back on a Friday night. And that worked just great until we couldn't get on planes anymore. So now I commute. It just is a 12-hour commute. And so depending on the weather, when the weather's nice, pack up and go to Phoenix. Very nice lifestyle there. And then particularly in the summer months, coming back up here. But it is a 12-hour commute with dogs and everything packed in the car. So it's just that we all adapt. That's what
there's probably a professional description for traveling 12 hours with dogs. For all you dog lovers out there, we love traveling with our dog, but it is an effort. You have to think about every little pit stop along the way.
Yes, you do. And then they you can't tell them to wait.
Yes. Well, thanks, Alex, again. I appreciate you joining us this morning. We appreciate you as a customer, and we want to just say happy holidays to you and your family, and as well as all the people that have joined us this morning. Again, thanks a lot, Alex. Appreciate your time.
Always a pleasure. If anyone has questions, alexandra.morehouse@bannerhealth.com.
Very cool. Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.